Hello everybody, this is TipTop MTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, we are going to be making some custom Magic the Gathering mechanics using a random verb, adjective, and noun generator. So here's how this is going to work. I am going to generate 3 either verbs, adjectives, or nouns, and you'll be able to see right above the list of words what it is, and I'm going to turn that into a mechanic of some sort. And so I'm probably going to do about 3 different words today, and what's going to happen, I'm going to take the word, I might do a couple different interpretations of it, and you'll kind of get to see my thought process as I design custom mechanics. And if something maybe is a little bit confusing, I may also build an example card to go with it. But, you know, it'll all make sense once we get started. So why don't we start by generating 3 random verbs? Our random verbs are transport, concentrate, and resume. So, and some verbs are much easier to do than others. There are kind of a couple different type of magic mechanics. There are those that are kind of like an action, like a card that says pay for and then emerge or something. That is an action, so that would be a verb, and so these are generally the easiest. There are also those that are adjectives, similar to like menace or vigilance. And then noun, which is going to be a little bit trickier, we'll get to that when we get there. But here, transport, okay, I mean, maybe you can do something with that. Concentrate, not a huge fan of it, but I think that one is probably better than transport. And then resume, could be interesting if you did a pause and resume kind of thing, maybe. But honestly, I don't see how big that mechanic could be. So why don't we go with concentrate? So concentrate. There are a lot of things that I think could be done with this, but honestly, I could see them all revolving around one concept. So why don't I write down my first kind of draft? Alright, so here's kind of my first concept. It's concentrate, and so this is an example because it's very similar to something like undergrowth, where it's kind of just a descriptor. It says, as long as this creature is tapped, you may look at the top card of your library at any time. So what's the inspiration? Why does this make sense for concentrate? Well, if a creature is tapped, they are not going to be in combat, and so they're going to be able to relax, focus, and be able to give you some sort of a long-term benefit. So something along that line could be kind of interesting. So, you know, you can maybe attack with the creature to get it tapped to then get the effect, or maybe this creature also has an ability that lets you pay mana to tap it and maybe like scry, maybe? I don't know. It's very interesting in my opinion, you know, this as long as a creature's tapped, but it's also a little bit generic, and I'm not a huge fan of mechanics similar to Undergrowth or Addendum, where they are just kind of, or even Landfall. Yes, they're kind of interesting mechanics, but they are kind of just a prefix. Like, you could get rid of the word landfall from all of Magic, and no card would change. You know, a lot of time when they're reprinted, they may not even say landfall on them because it's just letting you know, hey, this cares about when lands enter the battlefield. So I wonder if there's a way I could do this where it's not just a descriptor saying, hey, this is going to care about a tapped creature. Let's see. So let's move on to idea 2. Here's kind of an example card again, but the wording would be concentrate and then a mana cost. So this may say concentrate 2 and a red. Probably be in blue and white though. So then it says tap this creature. And actually, all right, so let's kind of do this again. I added a little line here. So it says tap this creature if it's untapped. If you do, it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So you're going to be doing this to your creature. You're going to say, hey, tap this. Now, if it is already tapped, it cannot be tapped, which is why I added the if it is untapped, if you do. And then it says this creature becomes concentrated until it becomes untapped. So while this really doesn't do anything but tap down your creature, it would probably be paired with cards that say things like concentrated creatures you control have hexproof. So now you have this kind of card that will give your kind of tapped down creatures hexproof, and you may not want to be tapping down your creatures, but maybe it gives you some sort of effect. And what I find interesting is that it's not until your next turn. It does not become, you know, it's not concentrating until your next turn. It's till it becomes untapped, which I think allows for a lot of interesting dynamics, and that's what I really like about a mechanic. Yes, some mechanics are cool, but they're very, very vague, or not vague, but they don't have like interesting dynamic things you can do with them. You're kind of just doing that mechanic, and that's about it. But the way concentrated is worded here, if you have ways to manipulate what creatures are tapping and untapping, and maybe reducing the cost of abilities, you can do some really interesting things with it, compared to something like this, which, yes, you can manipulate tapping and untapping, but it's also kind of boring. And this also kind of is almost like a tribal theme, where you're going to want to put more and more concentrated cards, but they're also done in such a way that they don't have to be together. It's kind of a perfect mechanic. I'm not saying this is a perfect mechanic, but a perfect mechanic, in my opinion, can have a deck formed around it. You can have your morph deck, but you can also put a morph card in another deck, and morph isn't a great example of that, but just a mechanic like that. You could build a whole concentrate deck where all these tapped creatures you have tapped down, using the concentrate ability, they all are getting all these huge bonuses, or giving you bonuses. For instance, if it said at the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card for each concentrated creature you control, that would be on an expensive card, but it could be something very interesting, and I like the idea of it. Either way, let's move on to an adjective. So, yeah. Let's move on here. Let's generate them. We have careless, industrious, envious. Okay, so I don't think industrious or envious is going to... I mean, envious and careless are kind of the two I'm thinking, and I'm going to go with careless first. Now, a lot of the time when I pick a word, I have an idea in mind. I don't really have one, so I'm just going to type a little bit until I come up with something that I think is interesting. So let's do that. So the first three, I'm not super huge on any of them, but adjectives are a little bit more difficult. We have careless. This creature must attack each combat if able. So we see this on cards occasionally, but doing it this way, it lets it be more simplified. I don't know if careless is the word they would use, but the idea here is, oh, you're carelessly, like, attacking, and if you're looking at it from like maybe a different kind of game perspective, you're just swinging around corners, going in for the attack, you're not really thinking it out. The second version is careless. When this creature dies, do something. This is very similar to the concentrate up here, where it's just kind of the descriptor of an ability that starts as long as this creature is tapped. When this creature dies, I don't really think it's necessary unless you have a set that's really built around that. And again, I don't think careless would be the right word. And then we have careless. This creature must block at least one creature each combat if able. So it's very similar to this careless, but kind of the inverse of it. Honestly, not a big fan of these entirely, although I do think this creature must attack each combat if able would be a nice thing to have a keyword for. So I'm going to say this is the better one out of all of them. So yeah, this is going to be the one that I choose. So let's underline it. I'm going to underline my favorite ones. So those are my favorites. The other ones I think are interesting, but this is this one is such a niche effect that I don't think there'd be enough creatures that would want it. And then this one is also just kind of useless in, like, you could literally just get rid of this and nothing would change. So I don't think that's a very interesting mechanic. So let's move on to the next one. All right, so the next one is nouns. We have personality, growth, climate. Okay, so normally when it comes to nouns, I have to look at mechanics from a bigger picture perspective. And what I mean by that is, like, one time I had the word perspective, and so I did this whole thing where you could swap people's perspectives, which essentially meant that you could see all hidden information the other player could see, and vice versa, for instance. And so, like, a lot of the times these ones are reaching, and I honestly think you could do something kind of interesting with climate. I think it would be kind of complex, but let's see how it goes. Here's kind of my first kind of draft, maybe. It's climate. Each black in the mana cost of permanents on the battlefield counts towards the climate of black. And so this is kind of like devotion, but it's for everyone. And so this was my first thought, was, oh, maybe we can do something kind of similar to devotion. So let's do one more version of this that maybe it's the same concept, but slightly tweaked. So here's another one. Each black in the mana cost of permanents your opponents control. So now it's the actual opposite of devotion, because in this one, kind of whatever the climate was your devotion plus your opponent's devotion. Another interesting thing could be maybe limiting it to non-creature permanents, although now I feel like we're getting a little too specific. The idea is like, oh, if there are a bunch of blue enchantments, it's a blue environment. Or if there's a bunch of black enchantments or whatever, but I think just leaving it with permanents means like, oh, there's a bunch of black creatures, that means something, you know, there's a big climate. And so if you haven't seen devotion cards, it'd be something similar to that, but it would probably be closer to like, when this creature enters the battlefield, if the climate of black is greater than the climate of all other colors, do something. And then you get this interesting thing where you're trying to maybe remove enemy permanents because they're messing with the climate. And so it's like, oh, I have 5 devotion to black, but you have 6 devotion, or you have 6 devotion to blue, which means that blue is the biggest climate right now. So I need to kill your blue permanent so that the black climate gets actually higher than the blue climate so that I get boost. And so that's kind of my idea here, so that it's something that you're constantly thinking about and allows for gameplay implications. It's not just a simpler way to say a creature must attack each turn. It's actually something that would have gameplay implications. So I would say this, I would say that this one is probably my favorite, just because having a mechanic that literally relies on your opponents, would not be great. The only place I could see it is destroy all permanents of the like greatest climate, or greatest climate, you know, whatever the wording would be. But I definitely think your stuff being counted towards it does make it a little bit closer to devotion, but I think it makes it a better mechanic. Either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. I want to know what you guys think about it. It's been a while since I've done one of these, so I thought it could be fun. I thought I'd spend a little bit more time on each mechanic, thinking them out, rather than doing like 5 or 6 of them in the video. So yeah, I want to know what you guys would do. First off, would you have picked different words? For instance, would you have gone with maybe personality instead, or industrious, or resume? Would you have done that? If you would have picked the words I would have picked, which by the way, all start with C, what would you have done? Would you have done something different? I want to know your guys' ideas. I will respond to them in the comment down below. So yeah, do that. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.